proposed another one. Some sophisticates think it may be a little gimmicky. I think it's good. It's a checkoff. It says to you as a taxpayer, say you're going to pay a tax of $1,000 or something. You can check 10% of that if you want to in one box, and that 10%, $100, or if you're paying $10,000, whatever it is, $1,000, check it off and make the government, make it lower the deficit by that amount. And if the Congress won't do it, if they can't get together and negotiate how to do that, then you'd have a sequester across the board. You'd exempt Social Security. I don't want to tax or touch Social Security. I'm the president that said, hey, don't mess with Social Security, and we haven't. So I believe we need to control the growth of mandatory spending. Back to this gentleman's question, that's the main growing thing in the budget. The program that the president, 2/3 of the budget, I as president, never get to look at, never get to touch. We've got to control that growth to inflation and population increase, but not raise taxes on the American people now. I just don't believe that would stimulate any kind of growth at all.
How about you, Mr. Perot?
Well, we're $4 trillion in debt. We're going into debt an additional $1 billion, a little more than $1 billion every working day of the year. Now, the thing I love about it, I'm just a businessman. I was down in Texas taking care of business, tending to my family. This situation got so bad that I decided I better get into it. The American people asked me to get into it. But I just find it fascinating that while we sit here tonight, we will go into debt an additional $50 million in an hour and a half. Now, it's not the Republicans' fault, of course, and it's not the Democrats' fault. And what I'm looking for is who did it. Now, they're the two folks involved, so maybe if you put them together, they did it. Now, the facts are we have to fix it. We're leaving. I'm here tonight for these young people up here in the balcony from this college. When I was a young man, when I got out of the Navy, I had multiple job offers. Young people with high grades can't get a job. People, the 18 to 24-year-old high school graduates 10 years ago were making more than they are now. In other words, we were down to 18% of them were making, the 18 to 24-year-olds were making less than $12,000. Now that's up to 40%. And what's happened in the meantime? The dollar's gone through the floor. Now, whose fault is that? Not the Democrats, not the Republicans. Somewhere out there, there's an extraterrestrial that's doing this to us, I guess. And everybody says they take responsibility. Somebody somewhere has to take responsibility for this. Put it to you bluntly, American people. If you want me to be your president, we're going to face our problems. We'll deal with the problems. We'll solve our problems. We'll pay down our debt. We'll pass on the American dream to our children. And I will not leave our children a situation that they have today. When I was a boy, it took 2 generations to double the standard of living. Today, it will take 12 generations.
Okay,
our children will not see the American dream because of this debt that somebody somewhere dropped on us.
You're all wonderful speakers, and I know you have lots more to add, but I've talked to this audience, and they have lots of questions on other topics. Can we move to another topic, please? We have one up here, I think.
Yes, I'd like to address all the candidates with this question. The amount of time the candidates have spent in this campaign trashing their opponent's character and their programs is depressingly large. Why can't your discussions and proposals reflect the genuine complexity and the difficulty of the issues to try to build a consensus around the best aspects of all proposals?
Who wants to take that one? Mr. Perot, you have an answer for everything, don't you? Go right ahead, sir.
No, I don't have an answer for everything. But as you all know, I've been buying 30-minute segments to talk about issues. And tomorrow night on NBC from 10:30 to 11 Eastern, we're going to talk about how you pay the debt down. So we're going to come right down to that one. See, we'll be on again Saturday night, 8 to 9 o'clock on ABC. So,
okay,
this is my family. I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. And I have said again and again and again, let's get off mud wrestling, let's get off personalities, and let's talk about jobs, health care, crime, the things that concern the American people. I'm spending my money, not PAC money, not foreign money, my money, to take this message to the people.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. So that seems directed. He would say it's you gentlemen that have been doing that. Mr. Clinton, Governor Clinton, President Bush, how would you like to respond?
Well, first place, I believe that character is a part of being president. I think you have to look at it. I think that has to be a part of candidate for president or being president. In terms of programs, I've submitted, 4 different budgets to the United States Congress in great detail. They're so heavy they'd give you you know, broken back, and everything in there says what I am for. Now I've come out with a new agenda for America's renewal, a plan that I believe really will help stimulate the growth of this economy. My record on world affairs is pretty well known because I've been president for 4 years, so I feel I've been talking issues. You know, nobody likes who shot John, but I think the first negative campaign run in this election was by Governor Clinton. And I'm not going to sit there and be a punching bag. I'm going to stand up and say, hey, listen, here's my side of it. But character is an important part of the equation. The other night, Governor Clinton raised I don't know if you saw the debate the other night. Suffered through that. Well, he raised the question of my father. It was a good line, well rehearsed, and well delivered. But he raised the question of my father and said, well, your father, Prescott Bush, was against McCarthy. You should be ashamed of yourself, McCarthyism. I remember something my dad told me. I was 18-year-old, going to Penn Station to go on into the Navy. And he said, write your mother, which I faithfully did. He said, serve your country. My father was an honor duty and country man. And he said, tell the truth. And I've tried to do that in public life, all through it. And that says something about character. My argument with Governor Clinton, you can call it mud wrestling, but I think it's fair to put it in focus, is I am deeply troubled by someone who demonstrates and organizes demonstration in a foreign land when his country's at war. Probably a lot of kids here disagree with me, but that's what I feel. That's what I feel passionately about. I'm thinking of Ross Perot's running mate sitting in the jail. How would he feel about it? But maybe that's generational. I don't know. But the big argument I have with the governor on this is this taking different positions on different issues, trying to be one thing to one person here that's opposing the NAFTA agreement and then for it, what we call waffling. And I do think that you can't turn the White House into the Waffle House. You got to say what you're for. And you got to...
Mr. President, I'm getting time cues, and
Excuse
with all
me,
due respect, I'm sorry.
No,
Governor
go ahead,
Clinton.
Carol. I get wound up because I feel
Yes,
strong.
you do.
Let me say, first of all, to you that I believe so strongly in the question you asked that I suggested this format tonight. I started doing these formats a year ago in New Hampshire, and I found that we had huge crowds because all I did was let people ask questions, and I tried to give very specific answers. I also had a program starting last year. I've been disturbed by the tone and the tenor of this campaign. Thank goodness the networks have a fact check, so I don't have to just go blue in the face anymore. Mr. Bush said once again tonight I was going to have a $150 billion tax increase. When Mr. Quayle said that, all the networks said that's not true. He's got over $100 billion of tax cuts and incentives. So I'm not going to take up your time tonight, but let me just say this. We'll have a debate in 4 days, and we can talk about this character thing again. The Washington Post ran a long editorial today saying they couldn't believe Mr. Bush was making character an issue, and they said he was the greatest, quote, political chameleon for changing his positions of all time. Now, I don't want to get into that. Wait a minute.
Washington Post.
Let's don't, you don't have to believe that. Here's my point. I'm not interested in his character. I want to change the character of the presidency. And I'm interested in what we can trust him to do and what you can trust me to do and what you can trust Mr. Perot to do for the next 4 years. So I think you're right, and I hope the rest of the night belongs to you.
I talked to this audience before you gentlemen came, and I asked them about how they felt about the tenor of the campaign. Would you like to let them know what you thought about that? When I said, are you pleased with how the campaign's been going? Who wants to say why you don't like the way the campaign is going? We have a gentleman back here.
If I may. And forgive the notes here, but I'm shy on camera. The focus of my work as a domestic mediator is meeting the needs of the children that I work with by way of their parents and not the wants of their parents. And I ask the three of you, how can we, as symbolically the children of the future president, expect the two of you, the three of you, to meet our needs, the needs in housing and crime and you name it, as opposed to the wants of your political spin doctors and your political parties.
So your question is?
Can we focus on the issues and not the personalities and the mud? I think there is a need, if we could take a poll here with the folks from Gallup perhaps, I think there is a real need here to focus at this point on the needs.
How do you respond? How do you gentlemen respond to
I agree with him.
President Bush?
Let's do it. Let's talk about programs for children.
Could I ask one other thing?
Yeah.
Could we cross our hearts? It sounds silly here, but could we make a commitment? You know, we're not under oath at this point, but could you make a commitment to the citizens of the United States to meet our needs? And we have many, and not yours. Again, I repeat that it's a real need, I think, that we all have.
I think it depends how you define it. I mean, I think in general, let's talk about these issues. Let's talk about the programs. But in the presidency, a lot goes into it. Caring goes into it. That's not particularly specific. Strength goes into it. That's not specific. Standing up against aggression. That's not specific in terms of a program. This is what a president has to do. So in principle, though, I'll take your point and think we ought to discuss child care or whatever else it is.
And you, too?
Go ahead.
Ross had his hand up.
Just
Yes, right.
no hedges, no ifs, ands, and buts. I'll take the pledge because I know the American people want to talk about issues and not tabloid journalism. So I'll take the pledge and we'll stay on the issues. Now, just for the record, I don't have any spin doctors. I don't have any speech writers. Probably shows. I make those charts you see on television even. That shows. Now, but you don't have to wonder if it's me talking. Say, what you see is what you get. If you don't like it, you got two other choices, right?
Wait a minute. I want to say just one thing now, Ross, in fairness. The ideas I express are mine. I've worked on these things for 12 years, and I'm the only person up here who hasn't been part of Washington in any way for the last 20 years. So I don't want the implication to be that somehow everything we say just cooked up and put in our head by somebody else. I worked 12 years very hard as a governor on the real problems of real people. I'm just as sick as you are by having to wake up and figure out how to defend myself every day. I never thought I'd ever be involved in anything like this.
May I finish?
Yes, you may finish.
Very briefly.
Yes, very briefly.
And I don't have any foreign money in my campaign. I don't have any foreign lobbyists on leave in my campaign. I don't have any PAC money in my campaign. I got 5.5 million hardworking people who put me on the ballot, and I belong to them.
Okay.
And they are interested in what you're interested in. I take the pledge. I've already taken the pledge on cutting the deficit in half. I never got to say that. There's a great young group, Lead or Leave, college students, young people, who don't want us to spend their money. I took the pledge we'd cut it out.
Thank you. We have a question here.
Yes, I would like to get a response from all three gentlemen. And the question is, what are your plans to improve the physical infrastructure of this nation, which includes the water system, the sewer system, our transportation systems, etc.? Thank you.
The cities. Who's going to fix the cities and how?
Be glad to take a shot at it.
Please.
I'm not sure that, and I could understand if you haven't seen this, because there's been a lot of hue and cry. We passed this year the most farthest-looking transportation bill in the history of this country since Eisenhower started the interstate highways. $150 billion for improving the infrastructure. That happened when I was president. And so I'm very proud of the way that came about. And I think it's a very, very good beginning. Like Mr. Perot, I am concerned about the deficits. And $150 billion is a lot of money, but it's awful hard to say we're going to go out and spend more money when we're trying to get the deficit down. But I would cite that as a major accomplishment. We hear all the negatives. When you're president, you expect this. Everybody's running against the incumbent. They can do better. Everyone knows that. But here's something that we can take great pride in because it really does get to what you're talking about. Our home initiative, our home ownership initiative, HOPE, that passed the Congress, is a good start for having people own their own homes instead of living in these deadly tenements. Our enterprise zones that we hear a lot of lip service about in Congress would bring jobs into the inner city. There's a good program. And I need the help of everybody across this country to get it passed in substantial way by the Congress. When we went out to South Central in Los Angeles, some of you may remember the riots there. I went out there, I went to a boys club, and every one of them, the boys club leaders, the ministers, all of them were saying, pass enterprise zones. We go back to Washington, and very difficult to get it through the Congress, but there's going to be a new Congress. No one likes gridlock. There's going to be a new Congress, because the old one, I don't want to get this man mad at me, but there was a post office scandal and a bank scandal. You can have a lot of new members of Congress. And then you can sit down and say, help me do what we should for the cities. Help me pass these programs.
Mr. President, aren't you threatening to veto the bill, the urban aid bill that included enterprise zones?
Sure, but the problem is you get so many things included in a great big bill that you have to look at the overall good. That's the problem with our system. If you had a line item veto, you could knock out the pork, you could knock out the tax increases, and you could do what the people want, and that is create enterprise zones.
Governor Clinton, you're chomping at the bit.
That bill pays for these urban enterprise zones by asking the wealthiest Americans to pay a little more, and that's why he wants to veto it. Just like he vetoed an earlier bill this year. This is not mudslinging, this is fact slinging. A bill earlier this year, this is facts, that would have given investment tax credits and other incentives to reinvest in our cities, in our country, but it asked the wealthiest Americans to pay a little more. Mr. Perot wants to do the same thing. I agree with him. I mean, we agree with that. Let me tell you specifically what my plan does. My plan would dedicate $20 billion a year in each of the next 4 years for investments in new transportation, communications, environmental cleanups, and new technologies for the 21st century. And we would target it especially in areas that have been either depressed or which have lost a lot of defense-related jobs. There are 200,000 people in California, for example, who've lost their defense-related jobs. They ought to be engaged in making high-speed rail. They ought to be engaged in breaking ground in other technologies, doing waste recycling, clean water technology, and things of that kind. We can create millions of jobs in these new technologies, more than we're going to lose in defense if we target it. But we're investing a much smaller percentage of our income in the things you just asked about than all of our major competitors. And our wealth growth is going down as a result of it. It's making the country poorer, which is why I answered the gentleman the way I did before. We have to both bring down the deficit and get our economy going through these kinds of investments in order to get the kind of wealth and jobs and incomes we need in America.
Mr. Perot, what about your plans for the cities? You want to tackle the economy and the deficit first.
First, you got to have money to pay for these things. So you've got to create jobs. There are all kinds of ways to create jobs in the inner city. Now, I'm not a politician, but I think I could go to Washington in a week and get everybody holding hands and get this bill signed, because I talked to the Democratic leaders and they want it. I talked to Republican leaders and they want it. But since they are bred from childhood to fight with one another rather than get results, you know, I would be glad to drop out and spend a little time and see if we couldn't build some bridges. Now, results is what counts. The president can't order Congress around. Congress can't order the president around. That's not bad for a guy that's never been there, right? But you have to work together. Now, I have talked to the chairman of the committees that want this. They're Democrats. The president wants it, but we can't get it because we sit here in gridlock because it's a campaign year. We didn't fund a lot of other things this year, like the savings and loan mess. That's another story that we're going to pay a big price for right after the election. Right. The facts are, though, the American people are hurting. These people are hurting in the inner cities. We're shipping the low-paying, quote, low-paying jobs overseas. What are low-paying jobs? Textiles, shoes, things like that we say are yesterday's industries. They're tomorrow's industries in the inner city. Let me say, in my case, if I'm out of work, I'll cut grass tomorrow to take care of my family. I'll be happy to make shoes. I'll be happy to make clothing. I'll make sausage. You just give me a job. Put those jobs in the inner cities instead of doing diplomatic deals and shipping them to China where prison labor does the work.
Mr. Perot, everybody thought you won the first debate because you were plain speaking and you made it sound oh so simple. We'll just do it. What makes you think that you're going to be able to get the Democrats and Republicans together any better than these guys?
If you ask me if I could fly a fighter plane or be an astronaut, I can't. I spent my life creating jobs. It's something I know how to do. And very simply in the inner city, they're starved. See, small businesses is the way to jumpstart the inner city.
Are you answering my question?
You want jobs in the inner city? Do you want jobs in the inner city? Is that
no,
your
I want you to tell me how you're going to be able to get the Republicans and Democrats in Congress to work together better than these two gentlemen.
I've listened to both sides, and if they would talk to one another instead of throwing rocks, I think we could get a lot done. And among other things, I would say, okay, over here in this Senate committee, to the chairman who is anxious to get this bill passed, to the president who's anxious, I'd say rather than just yelling at one another, why don't we find out where we're apart, try to get together, get the bill passed, and give the people the benefits and not play party politics right now. And I think the press would follow that so closely that probably they would get it done. That's the way I would do it. I doubt if they'll give me the chance, but I will drop everything and go work on it.
Okay, I have a question here.
My question was originally for Governor Clinton, but I think I would welcome a response from all three candidates. As you are aware, crime is rampant in our cities. And in the Richmond area, and I'm sure it's happened elsewhere, 12-year-olds are carrying guns to school. And I'm sure when our founding fathers wrote the Constitution, they did not mean for the right to bear arms to apply to 12-year-olds. So I'm asking, where do you stand on gun control, and what do you plan to do about it?
Governor Clinton.
I support the right to keep and bear arms. I live in a state where over half the adults have hunting or fishing licenses or both. But I believe we have to have some way of checking handguns before they're sold, to check the criminal history, the mental health history, and the age of people who are buying them. Therefore, I support the Brady bill, which would impose a national waiting period unless and until a state did what only Virginia has done now, which is to automate its records. Once you automate your records, then you don't have to have a waiting period, but at least you can check. I also think we should have, frankly, restrictions on assault weapons whose only purpose is to kill. We need to give the police a fighting chance in our urban areas where the gangs are building up. The third thing I would say, it doesn't bear directly on gun control, but it's very important. We need more police on the street. There is a crime bill which would put more police on the street, which was killed for this session by a filibuster in the Senate, mostly by Republican senators. And I think it's a shame it didn't pass. I think it should be made the law, but it had the Brady bill in it, the waiting period. I also believe that we should offer college scholarships to people who will agree to work them off as police officers. And I think as we reduce our military forces, we should let people earn military retirement by coming out and working as police officers. 30 years ago, there were 3 police officers on the street for every crime. Today, there are 3 crimes for every police officer. In the communities which have had real success, putting police officers near schools where kids carry weapons to get the weapons out of the schools, or on the same blocks, you've seen crime go down. In Houston, there's been a 15% drop in the crime rate in the last year because of the work the mayor did there in increasing the police force. So I know it can work. I've seen it happen.
Thank you. President Bush?
I think you put your finger on a major problem. I talk about strengthening the American family, and it's very hard to strengthen the family if people are scared to walk down to the corner store and, send their kid down to get a loaf of bread. It's very hard. I have been fighting for very strong anti-crime legislation. Habeas corpus reform, so you don't have these endless appeals. So when somebody gets sentenced, hey, this is for real. I've been fighting for changes in the exclusionary rules, so if an honest cop stops somebody and makes a technical mistake, the criminal doesn't go away. I'll probably get into a fight in this room with some, but I happen to think that we need stronger death penalties for those that kill police officers. Virginia's on the lead in this, as Governor Clinton properly said, on this identification system for firearms. I am not for national registration of firearms. Some of the states that have the toughest anti-gun laws have the highest levels of crime. I am for the right, as the governor says. I'm a sportsman, and I don't think you ought to eliminate all kinds of weapons. But I was not for the bill that he was talking about because it was not tough enough on the criminal. I'm very pleased that the Fraternal Order of Police in Little Rock, Arkansas endorsed me because I think they see I'm trying to strengthen the anti-crime legislation. We've got more money going out for local police than any previous administration. So we've got to get it under control. And there's one last point I'd make. Drugs. We have got to win our national strategy against drugs, the fight against drugs. And we're making some progress, doing a little better on interdiction. We're not doing as well amongst the people that get to be habitual drug users. The good news is, and I think it's true in Richmond, teenage use is down of cocaine substantially, 60% in the last couple of years. So we're making progress, but until we get that one done, we're not going to solve the neighborhood crime problem.
Mr. Perot, there are young black males in America dying at unprecedented
I didn't get to make
rates.
a comment on this.
Yes, I'm
Oh,
getting to
you're
that
going to
point.
elaborate.
The
Okay,
fact
excuse
that-
me. Excuse me.
that homicide is the leading cause of death among young black males 15 to 24 years of old. What are you going to do to get the guns off the street?
On any program, and this includes crime, you'll find we have all kinds of great plans lying around that never get enacted into law and implemented. I don't care what it is, competitiveness, health care, crime, you name it. Brady bill, I agree with that it's a timid step in the right direction, but it won't fix it. So
what do we
why
do in the
pass a
meantime?
law that won't fix it? Now, what it really boils down to is, can you live? We have become so preoccupied with the rights of the criminal that we've forgotten the rights of the innocent. And in our country, we have evolved to a point where we've put millions of innocent people in jail because you go to the poor neighborhoods and they put bars on their windows and bars on their doors and put themselves in jail to protect the things that they acquired legitimately. Now, that's where we are. We have got to become more concerned about people who play by the rules and get the balance we require. This is going to take, first, building a consensus at grassroots America, right from the bottom up. The American people have got to say they want it. And at that point, we can pick from a variety of plans and develop new plans, and the way you get things done is bury yourselves in a room with one another, put together the best program, take it to the American people, use the electronic town hall, the kind of thing you're doing here tonight, build the consensus, and then do it, and then go on to the next one. But don't just sit here slow dancing for 4 years doing nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. We have a question up here.
Please state your position on term limits, and if you are in favor of them, how will you get them enacted?
Any order? I'd be glad to respond.
Thank you.
I strongly support term limits for members of the United States Congress. I believe it would return the government closer to the people, in the way that Ross Perot is talking about. The president's terms are limited to 2, total of 8 years. What's wrong with limiting the terms of members of Congress to 12? Congress has gotten kind of institutionalized. For 38 years, one party has controlled the House of Representatives, and the result, sorry little post office that can't do anything right, and a bank that has more overdrafts than all the Chase Bank and Citibank put together. We've got to do something about it, and I think you get a certain arrogance, bureaucratic arrogance, if people stay there too long. And so I strongly favor term limits. And how to get them passed? Send us some people that'll pass the idea. And I think you will. I think the American people want it now. Every place I go, I talk about it, and I think they want it done. Actually, you'd have to have some amendments to the Constitution because of the way the Constitution reads.
Thank you. Governor Clinton.
I know they're popular, but I'm against them. I'll tell you why. I believe, number one, it would pose a real problem for a lot of smaller states in the Congress. It would have enough trouble now making sure their interests are heard. Number two, I think it would increase the influence of unelected staff members in the Congress who have too much influence already. I want to cut the size of the congressional staffs, but I think you're going to have too much influence there with people who were never elected, who have lots of expertise. Number three, if the people really have a mind to change, they can. You're going to have 120 to 150 new members of Congress. Now, let me tell you what I favor instead. I favor strict controls on how much you can spend running for Congress, strict limits on political action committees, requirements that people running for Congress appear in open public debates like we're doing now. If you did that, you could take away the incumbent's advantage, because challengers like me would have a chance to run against incumbents like him for House races and Senate races, and then the voters could make up their own mind without being subject to an unfair fight. So that's how I feel about it, and I think if we had the right kind of campaign reform, we'd get the changes you want.
Mr. Perot, would you like to address term limitations?
Yes. Let me do it first on a personal level. If the American people send me up to do this job, I intend to be there one term. I do not intend to spend 1 minute of one day thinking about re-election. And as a matter of principle, and my situation is unique and I understand it, I would take absolutely no compensation. I go as their servant. Now, I have set as strong an example as I can. Then at that point, when we sit down over at Capitol Hill, Tomorrow night, I'm going to be talking about government reform. It's a long subject. You wouldn't let me finish tonight. If you want to hear it, you get it tomorrow night. But the point is, sorry, just a little silly. If you're here tomorrow night. But we have got to reform government. If you put term limits in and don't reform government, you won't get the benefits you thought. It takes both. So we need to do the reforms and the term limits, and after we reform it, it won't be a lifetime career opportunity. Good people will go serve and then go back to their homes and not become foreign lobbyists and cash in at $30,000 a month and then take time off to run some president's campaign. Yeah, they're all nice people, they're just in a bad system. I don't think they're any villains, but boy, is the system rotten.
Thank you very much. We have a question over here.
I'd like to ask Governor Clinton, do you attribute the rising costs of health care to the medical profession itself, or do you think the problem lies elsewhere? And what specific proposals do you have to tackle this problem?
I've had more people talk to me about their health care problems, I guess, than anything else. All across America, you know, people who've lost their jobs, lost their businesses, had to give up their jobs because of sick children. And so let me try to answer you in this way. Let's start with a premise. We spend 30% more of our income than any nation on earth on health care, and yet we insure fewer people. We have 35 million people without any insurance at all, and I see them all the time. 100,000 Americans a month have lost their health insurance just in the last 4 years. So if you analyze where we're out of line with other countries, you come up with the following conclusions. Number one, we spend at least $60 billion a year on insurance, administrative costs, bureaucracy, and government regulation that wouldn't be spent in any other nation. So we have to have, in my judgment, a drastic simplification of the basic health insurance policies of this country. Be very comprehensive for everybody. Employers would cover their employees, government would cover the unemployed. Number two, I think you have to take on specifically the insurance companies and require them to make some significant change in the way they rate people into big community pools. I think you have to tell the pharmaceutical companies they can't keep raising drug prices at 3 times the rate of inflation. I think you have to take on medical fraud. I think you have to help doctors stop practicing defensive medicine. I've recommended that our doctors be given a set of national practice guidelines, and that if they follow those guidelines, that raises the presumption that they didn't do anything wrong. I think you have to have a system of primary and preventive clinics in our inner cities and our rural areas so people can have access to health care. The key is to control the cost and maintain the quality. To do that, you need a system of managed competition where all of us are covered in big groups and we can choose our doctors and our hospitals across a wide range, but there is an incentive to control costs. And I think there has to be, I think Mr. Perot and I agree on this, there has to be a national commission of healthcare providers and healthcare consumers that sets ceilings to keep health costs in line with inflation plus population growth. Now let me say, some people say we can't do this, but Hawaii does it. They cover 98% of their people, and their insurance premiums are much cheaper than the rest of America. And so does Rochester, New York. They now have a plan to cover everybody, and their premiums are 2/3 the rest of the country. This is very important. It's a big human problem and a devastating economic problem for America, and I'm going to send a plan to do this within the first 100 days of my presidency. It's terribly important.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you short, but President Bush, health care reform.
I just have to say something. I don't want to stampede. Ross was very articulate across the country. I don't want anybody to stampede to cut the president's salary off altogether. Barbara's sitting over here, and but what I have proposed, 10% cut, downsize the government, and we can get that done. She asked the question, I think, is whether the health care profession was to blame. No. One thing to blame is these malpractice lawsuits. They are breaking the system. It costs $20 to $25 billion a year. And I want to see those outrageous claims capped. Doctors don't dare to deliver babies sometimes because they're afraid that somebody's going to sue them. People don't dare, medical practitioners, to help somebody along the highway that are hurt because they're afraid that some lawyer's going to come along and get a big lawsuit. So you can't blame the practitioners or the health profit. And my program is this: keep the government as far out of it as possible, make insurance available to the poorest of the poor through vouchers, next range in the income bracket through tax credits, and get on about the business of pooling insurance. A great big company can buy, Ross got a good-sized company, been very successful. He can buy insurance cheaper than mom and pop store in the corner. But if those mom and pop stores all get together and pool, they too can bring the cost of insurance down. So I want to keep the quality of health care. That means keep government out of it. I want to do better. I don't like this idea of these boards. It all sounds to me like you're going to have some government setting price. I want competition, and I want to pool the insurance and take care of it that way. And have, oh, here's the other point. I think medical care should go with the person. If you leave a business, I think your insurance should go with you to some other business. You shouldn't be worrying if you get a new job as to whether that's going to, and part of our plan is to make it what they call portable, big word, but that means if you're working for the Jones Company, you go to the Smith Company, your insurance goes with you. I think it's a good program. I'm really excited about getting it done, too.
Mr. Perot.
We have the most expensive health care system in the world. 12% of our gross national product goes to health care. Our industrial competitors who are beating us in competition spend less and have better health care. Japan spends a little over 6% of its gross national product. Germany spends 8%. It's fascinating. You brought a front row box seat and you're not happy with your health care. And you're saying tonight we've got bad health care but very expensive health care. It's, folks, here's why. Go home and look in the mirror. You own this country, but you have no voice in it the way it's organized now. And if you want to have a high-risk experience comparable to bungee jumping, go into Congress sometime when they're working on this kind of legislation, when the lobbyists are running up and down the halls. Wear your safety-toe shoes when you go. And as a private citizen, believe me, you are looked on as a major nuisance. The facts are you now have a government that comes at you. You're supposed to have a government that comes from you. Now, there are all kinds of good ideas, brilliant ideas, terrific ideas on health care. None of them ever get implemented because, let me give you an example. Senator runs every 6 years. He's got to raise $20,000 a week to have enough money to run. Who's he got to listen to, us or the folks running up and down the aisles with money, the lobbyists, the PAC money? He listens to them. Who do they represent? Health care industry, not us. Now, you've got to have a government that comes from you again. You've got to reassert your ownership in this country, and you've got to completely reform our government. And at that point, they'll just be like apples falling out of a tree. The programs will be good because the elected officials will be listening to you. I said the other night I was all ears, and I would listen to any good idea. I think we ought to do plastic surgery on a lot of these guys so that they're all ears too and listen to you. Then you get what you want, and shouldn't you? You paid for it. Why shouldn't you get what you want as opposed to what some lobbyist cuts a deal, writes the little piece in the law, and it goes through? That's the way the game's played now. Till you change it, you're going to be unhappy.
Thank you. Governor Clinton, you wanted one brief point in there.
One brief point. We have elections so people can make decisions about this. The point I want to make to you is bipartisan commission reviewed my plan and the Bush plan and concluded, there were many Republicans as Democratic health care experts on it. They concluded that my plan would cover everybody and his would leave 27 million behind by the year 2000. And that my plan in the next 12 years would save $2.2 trillion in public and private money to reinvest in this economy. And the average family would save $1,200 a year under the plan that I offered without any erosion in the quality of health care. So I ask you to look at that. And you have to vote for somebody with the plan. That's what you have elections for. If people say, well, he got elected to do this, then the Congress says, okay, I'm going to do it. That's what the election was about.
Brief, Governor Clinton. Thank you. We have a question right here.
Yes. How has the national debt personally affected each of your lives? And if it hasn't, how can you honestly find a cure for the economic problems of the common people if you have no experience in what's ailing them?
May I answer that?
Well, Mr.
Who do you
Perot,
want to start
yes,
with?
Of course.
Who?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
For each of you.
Yes.
So you can
It
start
caused
with
me to disrupt my private life and my business to get involved in this activity. That's how much I care about it. And believe me, if you knew my family and if you knew the private life I have, you would agree in a minute that that's a whole lot more fun than getting involved in politics. But I have lived the American dream. I came from a very modest background. Nobody's been luckier than I've been. All the way across the spectrum, and the greatest riches of all are my wife and children. It's true of any family. But I want all the children, I want these young people up here to be able to start with nothing but an idea like I did and build a business. But they've got to have a strong basic economy. And if you're in debt, it's like having a ball and chain around you. I just figure, as lucky as I've been, I owe it to them. And I owe it to the future generations, and on a very personal basis, I owe it to my children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. Mr. President.
Well, I think the national debt affects everybody. Obviously, it has a lot to do with interest rates. It has.
She's saying you personally.
On a personal basis, how has it affected you?
Has it affected you personally?
Well, I'm sure it has. I love my grandchildren. I want to think
How?
that I want to think that they're going to be able to afford an education. I think that that's an important part of being a parent. Maybe I won't get it wrong. Are you suggesting that if somebody has means, that the national debt doesn't affect them?
Well, what I'm saying,
I'm not sure I get it. Help me with the question, and I'll try to answer it.
I've had friends that have been laid off from jobs.
Yeah.
I know people who cannot afford to pay the mortgage on their homes, their car payment. I have personal problems with the national debt, but how has it affected you? And if you have no experience in it, how can you help us if you don't know what we're feeling?
I think she means more the recession, the economic problems today the country faces,
Well,
rather
listen,
than the
you
deficit.
you ought to be in the White House for a day and hear what I hear and see what I see and read the mail I read and touch the people that I touch from time to time. I was in the Lomax AME Church. It's a black church just outside of Washington, D.C. And I read in the bulletin about teenage pregnancies, about the difficulty that families are having to make ends meet. I talk to parents. I mean, you got to care. Everybody cares if people aren't doing well. But I don't think it's fair to say you haven't had cancer, therefore you don't know what it's like. I don't think it's fair to say, whatever it is, that if you haven't been hit by it personally, but everybody's affected by the debt because of the tremendous interest that goes into paying on that debt. Everything's more expensive. Everything comes out of your pocket and my pocket. So it's that. But I think in terms of the recession, of course you feel it when you're president of the United States. And that's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education system. Thank
Governor
you. I'm glad to
Clinton?
clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again.
Um,
You know people who've lost their jobs
yeah.
and lost their homes?
Uh-huh.
Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the President sign laws that make us do more things, that gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this ever since October, with people like you all over America, people that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from 1st to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American health care costs, and bring the American people together again.
Thank you, Governor Clinton. We are a little more than halfway through this program, and I'm glad that we're getting the diversity of questions that we are. And I don't want to forget these folks on the wings over here, so let's go over here. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. My name is Ben Smith. I work in the financial field counseling retirees, and I'm personally concerned about three major areas. One is the Social Security Administration, or trust fund, is projected to be insolvent by the year 2036. And we funded the trust fund with IOUs in the form of treasury bonds. The Pension Guarantee Fund, which backs up our private retirement plans for retirees, is projected to be bankrupt by the year 2026, not to mention the cutbacks by private companies. And Medicare is projected to be bankrupt maybe as soon as 1997. And I would like from each of you a specific response as to what you intend to do for retirees relative to these issues, not generalities but specifics, because I think they're very disturbing issues.
President Bush, may we start with you?
Well, the Social Security, you're an expert, and I could, I'm sure, learn from you the details of the Pension Guarantee Fund and the Social Security Fund. The Social Security system was fixed about 5 years, and I think it's projected out to be sound beyond that. So at least we have time to work with it. But on all of these things, a sound economy is the only way to get it going. Growth in the economy is going to add to the overall prosperity and wealth. I can't give you a specific answer on Pension Guarantee Fund. All I know is that we have firm government credit to guarantee the pensions. And that is very important. But it's the full faith and credit of the United States in spite of our difficulties is still pretty good. It's still the most respected credit. So I would simply say, as these dates get close, you're going to have to reorganize and refix as we did with the Social Security Fund. And I think that's the only answer. But the more immediate answer is to do what this lady was suggesting we do, and that is to get this deficit down and get on without adding to the woes and then restructure. One thing I've called for that has been stymied, and I'll keep on working for it, is a whole financial reform legislation. It is absolutely essential in terms of bringing our banking system and credit system into the new age instead of having it living back in the dark ages. And it's a big fight. And I don't want to give my friend Ross another shot at me here, but I am fighting with the Congress to get this through. And you can't just go up and say, I'm going to fix it. You got some pretty strong-willed guys up there that argue with you. But that's what the election's about. I agree with the governor. That's what the election is about. And sound fiscal policy is the best answer, I think, to all the three problems you mentioned.
Thank you. Mr. Perot?
Just on the broad issue here, when you're trying to solve a problem, you get the best plans. You have a raging debate about those plans. Then, out of that debate with leadership comes consensus. Then, if the plans are huge and complex like health care, I would urge you to implement pilot programs. Like the old carpenter says, measure twice, cut once. You know, let's make sure this thing's as good as we all think it is at the end of the meeting. Then finally, our government passes laws and freezes the plan in concrete. Anybody that's ever built a successful business will tell you, you optimize, optimize, optimize after you put something into effect. The reason Medicare and Medicaid are a mess is we froze them. Everybody knows how to fix them. There are people all over the federal government, if they could just touch it with a screwdriver, could fix it. Now back over here. See, we've got a $4 trillion debt, and only in America would you have $2.8 trillion of it, or 70% of it, financed 5 years or less. Now, that's another thing for you to think about when you go home tonight. You don't finance long-term debt with short-term money. Why did our government do it? To get the interest rates down. A 1% increase in interest rates in that $2.8 trillion is $28 billion a year. Now, when you look at what Germany pays for money and what we don't pay for money, you realize there's quite a spread, right? And you realize this is a temporary thing, and there's going to be another sucking sound that runs our deficit through the roof. You know, and everybody's ducking it, so I'm going to say it, that we are not letting that surplus stay in the bank. We are not investing that surplus like a pension fund. We are spending that surplus to make the deficit look smaller to you than it really is. Now, that puts you in jail in corporate America if you kept books that way, but in government, it's just kind of the way things are. That's because it comes at you, not from you. Now then, that money needs to be, they don't even pay interest on it. They just write a note for the interest.
Mr. Perot, can
Now,
you
so
wrap
now
it
then,
up?
But the point, see, do you want to fix the problem or soundbite it? I understand the importance of time, but see, here's how we get to this mess we're in. This
But
is
we've
just
got
one
to
of
be
1,000.
fair.
Now then, to nail it, there's one way out. A growing, expanding job base. A growing, expanding job base to generate the funds and the tax revenues to pay off the mess and rebuild America. We got a double hit. If we're $4 trillion down, we should have everything perfect, but we don't. We got to pay it off and build money to renew it, spend money to renew it, and that's going to take a growing, expanding job base. That is priority one in this country. Put everybody that's breathing to work. And I'd love to be out of workers and have to import them like some of our international
Mr.
competitors.
Perot, I'm sorry, I'm going
Sorry.
And I don't want to soundbite you, but we are trying to be fair to everyone.
No, absolutely, I apologize.
All right. Governor Clinton.
I think I remember the question. let me say, first of all, I want to answer your specific question, but first of all, we all agree that there should be a growing economy. What you have to decide is who's got the best economic plan. And we all have ideas out there, and Mr. Bush has a record. So I don't want you to read my lips, and I sure don't want you to read his. I do hope you will read our plans. Now, specifically, one, on Medicare, it is not true that everyone knows how to fix it. There are different ideas. The Bush plan, the Perot plan, the Clinton, we have different ideas. I am convinced, having studied health care for a year hard and talking to hundreds and hundreds of people all across America, that you cannot control the cost of Medicare until you control the cost of private health care and public health care with managed competition, ceiling on cost, and radical reorganization of the insurance markets. You've got to do that. We've got to get those costs down. Number two, with regard to Social Security, that program, a lot of you may not know this, it produces a $70 billion surplus a year. Social Security is in surplus, $70 billion. 6 increases in the payroll tax. That means people with incomes of $51,000 a year or less pay a disproportionately high share of the federal tax burden, which is why I want some middle class tax relief. What do we have to do? By the time the century turns, we have got to have our deficit under control. We have to work out of so that surplus is building up so when the baby boomers like me retire, we're okay. Number three, on the pension funds, I don't know as much about it, but I will say this. What I would do is to bring in the pension experts of the country, take a look at it, and strengthen the pension requirements further, because it's not just enough to have the guarantee. We had a guarantee on the S&Ls, right? We had a guarantee, and what happened? You picked up a $500 billion bill because of the dumb way the federal government deregulated it. So I think we are going to have to change and strengthen the pension requirements on private retirement plans.
Thank you. I think we have a question here on international affairs, hopefully.
We've come to a position where we're in a new world order, and I'd like to know what the candidates feel our position is in this new world order and what our responsibilities are as a superpower.
Mr. President?
Well, we have come to that position. Since I became president, 43, 44 countries have gone democratic. No longer totalitarian, no longer living under dictatorship or communist rule. This is exciting. This is New World Order to me means freedom and democracy. I think we will have a continuing responsibility as the only remaining superpower to stay involved. If we pull back in some isolation and say we don't have to do our share or more than our share anymore, I believe you're going to just ask for conflagration that we'll get involved in the future. NATO, for example, has kept the peace for many, many years. And I want to see us keep fully staffed in NATO, so we'll continue to guarantee the peace in Europe. But the exciting thing is, the fear of nuclear war is down, and you hear all the bad stuff that's happened on my watch. I hope people will recognize that this is something pretty good for mankind. I hope they'll think it's good that democracy and freedom is on the move. And we're going to stay engaged, as long as I'm president, working to improve things. You know, it's so easy now to say, hey, cut out foreign aid, we got a problem at home. I think the United States has to still have the Statue of Liberty as a symbol, caring for others. We're right this very minute, we're sending supplies in to help these little starving kids in Somalia. We're trying to get, it's the United States that's taken the lead in humanitarian aid into Bosnia. We're doing this all around the world. And yes, we got problems at home. And I think I got a good plan to help fix those problems at home. But because of our leadership, because we didn't listen to the nuclear freeze group, do you remember? Freeze it back in about the late 70s. Freeze, don't touch it. We're going to lock it in now or else we'll have war. President Reagan said, no, peace through strength. It worked. The Soviet Union is no more, and now we're working to help them become totally democratic through the Freedom Support Act that I led on. A great Democratic ambassador, Bob Strauss over there, Jim Baker, all of us got this thing passed through cooperation, Ross. It worked with cooperation, and you're for that, I'm sure, helping Russia become democratic. So the New World Order to me means freedom and democracy. Keep engaged. Do not pull back into isolation. And we are the United States, and we have a responsibility to lead and to guarantee the security. If it hadn't been for us, Saddam Hussein would be sitting on top of 3/5 of the oil supply of the world, and he'd have nuclear weapons. And only the United States could do that. Excuse me, Carol.
Thank you. Mr. Perot.
Well, it's cost-effective to help Russia succeed in its revolution. It's pennies on the dollar compared to going back to the Cold War. Russia's still very unstable. They could go back to square one and worse. There's still, all the nuclear weapons are not dismantled. I'm particularly concerned about the intercontinental weapons, the ones that can hit us. We've got agreements, but they're still there. With all this instability and breaking into republics, and all the Middle Eastern countries going over there and shopping for weapons, we've got our work cut out for us. So we need to stay right on top of that and constructively help them move toward democracy and capitalism. We have to have money to do that. We have to have our people at work. See, for 45 years we were preoccupied with the Red Army. I suggest now that our number one preoccupation is red ink in our country. And we've got to put our people back to work so that we can afford to do these things we want to do in Russia. We cannot be the policeman for the world any longer. We spend $300 billion a year defending the world. Germany and Japan spend around $30 billion apiece. It's neat. If I can get you to defend me and I can spend all my money building industry, that's a home run for me. Coming out of World War II, it made sense. Now, the other superpowers need to do their part. I'll close on this point. You can't be a superpower unless you're an economic superpower. If we're not an economic superpower, we're a used to be, and we will no longer be a force for good throughout the world. And if nothing else gets you excited about rebuilding our industrial base, maybe that will, because it's job one, is to put our people back to work.
Governor Clinton, the president mentioned Saddam Hussein. Your vice president and you have had some words about the president and Saddam Hussein. Would you care to comment?
I'd rather answer her question first, and I'll be glad to. Because the question you ask is important. The end of the Cold War brings an incredible opportunity for change. Winds of freedom blowing around the world, Russia demilitarizing. And it also requires us to maintain some continuity, some bipartisan American commitment to certain principles. And I would just say there are three things that I would like to say. Number one, we do have to maintain the world's strongest defense. We may differ about what the elements of that are. I think the defense needs to be with fewer people in permanent armed services, but with greater mobility on the land, in the air, and on the sea, with a real dedication to continuing development of high technology weaponry and well-trained people. I think we're going to have to work to stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We've got to keep going until all those nuclear weapons in Russia are gone and the other republics. Number two, if you don't rebuild the economic strength of this country at home, we won't be a superpower. We can't have any more instances like what happened when Mr. Bush went to Japan and the Japanese Prime Minister said he felt sympathy for our country. We have to be the strongest economic power in the world. That's what got me into this race, so we could rebuild the American economy. And number three, we need to be a force for freedom and democracy, and we need to use our unique position to support freedom, whether it's in Haiti or in China or in any other place. Wherever the seeds of freedom are sprouting, we can't impose it, but we need to nourish it. And that's the kind of thing that I would do as president, follow those three commitments into the future.
Okay, we have a question up there.
Yes, we've talked a lot tonight about creating jobs, but we have an awful lot of high school graduates who don't know how to read a ruler, who cannot fill out an application for a job. How can we create high-paying jobs with the education system we have? And what would you do to change it?
Who would like to begin? The education president?
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd be delighted to, because you can't do it the old way. You can't do it with the school bureaucracy controlling everything. And that's why we have a new program that I hope people have heard about. It's being worked now in 1,700 communities. Bypassed Congress on this one, Ross. 1,700 communities across the country. It's called America 2000. And it literally says to the communities, reinvent.
Income tax and Social Security and Medicare. Corporate income tax is the third. The others are fairly small. How much money do we spend? We got $1.1 trillion coming in, but we're spending $1.5 trillion. Most of that goes to Social Security, Medicare, and other entitlements. Next to that is national defense, a little over $300 billion. Next to that is interest on the debt. That's unusually low this year because the interest rates are so low. but don't count on that continuing. Every time the interest rates go up 1%, the 70% of the national debt that's 5 years or less goes up $28 billion. That's the impact. What is the net effect of the way our country's been run? What used to be $1 in 1950 is now 18 cents. No wonder both parents are working, some of them 2 jobs, just to make ends meet. Running the value of the dollar down is really hurting the people in our country. Now let's look at the net effect on all of us. From 77 to 92, the poorest got poorer, the second poorest fifth, this is 20% of the population, still lost money. The middle fifth, the 3/5 up, still lost money. When you get to the 4/5, it's break even. The richest fifth is the only place it went up. Now go to the top 5% and the top 1%. Top 5% improved their incomes by 60%. The top 1% by 138%. Trickle-down economics didn't trickle, and this isn't fair. All right, what about our average hourly wage at a time when we need to have everybody at work and making more money so that we can pay our bills? Just follow it here. It's 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's dropping. Shouldn't surprise you. Supply and demand, we've got people out of work. Well, just to show you how fouled up the system is, in the middle of all this, what's happening to our corporate executive salaries compared to those of our industrial competitors who are beating us in head-to-head competition. Here's the ratio between worker compensation and executive compensation in Japan. Here's the ratio in Europe, and here is the ratio in the United States. Trickle-down economics didn't trickle at all, folks. It all stopped right here. That's not good for the companies, that's not good for the stockholders, that's not good for the country, and that leaves us vulnerable. Excuse me. These guys want to make this kind of money. They ought to be TV anchormen, basketball players, rock stars. But running a company, look, these fellows have their heads straight here. They're getting appropriate income, but not rock star income. Let's look at our international competitors. Now, you don't have to like the fact that we live in a tiny world, but I'm telling you, we're stuck with it. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Here we are. Look at how they are growing. Here's our growth. Here's Japan's growth. Here are the newly industrialized Asian countries that at one time you and I thought just raised rice. They're not raising rice anymore, folks. They've got what used to be the high-paying jobs here over there. This chart makes it as clear as I can to you in terms of who is going to own tomorrow. Think of Taiwan, tiny little island. There it is, just in a little piece of Texas. They're going to spend $600 billion on public investment programs. Our great country is going to spend $150 billion, 1/4 that much. We have a population of 248 million. Taiwan has 20 million. In fact, we're over about 12 times their population, and we're spending 1/4 as much preparing for the future. All right? Let's go from there to Japan. Here is Japan. Japan is about the size of Montana, if you pack it all together. It's much smaller than it appears on the map. Has a population half our size, but Japan is spending $80 billion right now on building for the future, short term. Now let's go to Germany. Keep your eye on Germany. I told you that they're paying a good price for money. Germany is right here in purple. Germany has 78 million people, but Germany will spend $1 trillion over the next 10 years rebuilding East Germany. We'd better get busy and start rebuilding our great country and not just wandering around saying, well, everything will work out if we don't do anything. Does that ever happen in your life? Say, maybe the problem will go away in my life. If I ever take that attitude, the problem just grows and grows and grows. If you want to have it go away, you make it go away. Okay, here's the end result of letting our country decay like this. The 18 to 24-year-old men in this country back in 1980, 18% of them made less than $12,000 a year. In 1990, it's up to 40%. With the women, in 1980, 29% made less than $12,000 a year. Today, 48% make less than $12,000 a year. And it is voodoo economics. And maybe now's the time for me to wave the voodoo stick and get rid of the hex. But it'll take a lot more than that. It'll take millions of you showing up on November the 3rd to get rid of this hex. Keep in mind, the value of the dollar is going down. The number of people making less than $12,000 is going up. I don't want to bore you with this statement, but trickle down didn't trickle. It just didn't work. We have 19th century capitalism in this country. Our successful international competitors are practicing modern-day capitalism. We need to practice 21st century capitalism. We need an intelligent, supportive relationship between government and business. We need long-term thinking. We need to target the industries of the future and make sure they are here and the words "Made in the USA" are written across them. We need to have the most rapidly growing small business society in the world because we can create more jobs more quickly there. All of this can be done, but just look at that, and I think you'll conclude the way we're going is the wrong way. Here are the solutions. We're going to start with balancing the budget. We've got to cut general spending by $315 billion, business tax increases of $49 billion, other tax increases of $293 billion, entitlement reform will bring us $268 billion, spending increases to help build our country an additional $109 billion, tax decreases $62 billion, it nets out savings of $754 billion. We got to balance the budget just like you have to balance your budget. Congressional Budget Office projection out through 98 is here. Our plan takes us down to here. That's a $754 billion deficit reduction. Do we have to do it? Of course we do. We're going to have a 10% cut in discretionary programs. We'll have a 5% cut in specific programs. These discretionary programs include such things as science grants, farm supports, government operations, et cetera, et cetera. Down here, we'll have a $22 billion cut in business subsidies, and we will have, over this period of time, $145 billion in interest savings just because we stopped spending so much extra money. Tax decreases. It's not all bad news. We will have a $27 billion decrease in taxes to get an investment tax credit, and that money will be spent to build new factories, buy plant and equipment, and create jobs. That money's spent right on the bullseye. Doesn't go in somebody's pocket to buy a yacht. Right over here, we're going to have a decrease here, and it's a tax credit to stimulate research and development. We call it now research and experimentation. You and I used to call it R&D. But this is to target the industries of the future and make sure that we lead and dominate in those industries. We're going to spend $10 billion in tax credits on worker training to train our people for the jobs of tomorrow. Now then, we've got to get money from institutions, from individuals, from every place there is money, invested in the treasuries of companies. Now hold that thought. Not shooting dice on Wall Street, invested in the treasuries of companies so that those companies have the money to create jobs. We will create more jobs more quickly by putting money into little companies, startup businesses, small businesses than any other way, but that is high-risk money. The investor may lose it. We've got to give the investor an incentive to put it there as opposed to buying government bonds or putting it in the bank, drawing interest in a savings account that's federally guaranteed. Believe me, this comes back again and again and again and again, and if anybody has any hesitation about it, we'll have a 30-minute program on this one because we're going to put it in the Treasury. The money will be used to build the company, to create jobs, and the tiny little money that goes into that Treasury and the tiny little bit of taxes that we don't get will be lost compared to the thousands of people that company may eventually employ, the payroll taxes they'll pay, the income taxes that company will pay. It will be a giant financial pump for our country. Business tax increases. We're going to improve the tax collection from foreign companies. That'll get us $21 billion. We'll reduce the business entertainment deduction. You know, kind of almost charge off anything against your income tax on entertainment now. We'll save $16 billion now. Have increase in user's fee of $12 billion. That'll bring us in $49 billion. Other tax increases. Here's one you don't like. Raise the gasoline tax. That brings us $158 billion, which we'll use to rebuild our country. Every other industrialized country has a much higher tax than we're proposing. It's 10 cents additional per year for 5 years. So it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It just adds up over time to a maximum of 50 cents after 5 years. The other two candidates like to tell you it's a 50-cent tax. No, it goes on 10 cents a year. And I'll tell you more in a minute about why we have to do it. We'll have a tax increase on tobacco. We'll have an increase on income tax rates for the top 4% of the population. And we'll reduce tax exemptions for the rich. For example, we'll put a ceiling of $250,000 on mortgages that you can deduct. There will be no deduction on mortgages on second homes. Let's go back to gasoline for a minute. Here's what our industrial competitors are doing. Italy collects $3.57 in taxes for every gallon of gasoline. France, $3.12. Japan, $2.25. United Kingdom, $2.09. Germany, $1.99. And the United States collects 35 cents. We have got to collect more taxes in this country, and this is one fair place to get it if we spend all of that money on building for the future and don't squander it on some new pork barrel program in Congress. This money will be dedicated for specific purposes. This is going to require sacrifice by all of us. It will pay huge dividends for us, our children, and our grandchildren. Now, I will be delighted if someone can come up with a better idea. If you don't like this, we've got to have a better idea. But this one right here, this gasoline tax, let's look at what it raises, $158 billion. Come up with something else that's more painless. It'll give us that. We'll drop it in a minute, go to that. Entitlement reform. Okay, we're going to have to repeal the salary cap of $130,000 on Medicare. You stop paying after $130,000 of income, you'll have to keep it up under this new program. Medicare premiums were initially designed to pay half the cost of Medicare Part B. Now it's down to 25%. We're going to raise it up to 35%. That'll give us $38 billion. Still a bargain for the people who use it. Healthcare cost containment, we can save $141 billion. You say, how sure am I? Dead sure, and I'll show you in a minute. Here, we will reduce COLAs for federal employees, and here we will tax the top 18% only of Social Security recipients on 85% of their income instead of 50% of their benefits. Now, this gets translated by the other two candidates as we're going to tax Social Security. Or last night, the President said we're going to cut it. No. All we're going to do, instead of taxing it at 50%, we're going to tax up to 85% and of the wealthiest. That's just the top 18%. Now, again, if you don't like that one, give me a better idea that will raise $30 billion. Now, why am I so confident that we can reduce health care spending by a dramatic amount? We're going to cut it $141 billion. All right, here's why I think so. Look at what the rest of the world spends on health care. 6% of gross national product here. Germany, 8%. Japan, 6.5%. We spend 12% and have an ineffective system. We're spending more than enough to have the world's finest health care. We rank behind 15 other nations in life expectancy and behind 22 other nations in infant mortality. We bought a front row box seat, air conditioned, and we didn't get to see the show. Just by cleaning this up, there's no question we can do it. We can save money, have world-class health care. All else fails, just copy the country in the other part of the world that have better health care than we do at a lower cost. Spending increases. We're going to spend $46 billion extra on research and development to build for the future. We're going to spend $40 billion on infrastructure. We're going to spend $12 billion extra on education and $11 billion extra on aid to cities. That's $109 billion. All of that will stimulate jobs. It's work that has to be done. Now, I have two charts here. They're very detailed, but it takes everything I've said on these charts that are easy to read and shows you in detail how we come down to the fact that we save $750 billion by the end of this cycle. So if anybody wants the detail, it's right here. It will take an hour to go through every number here, but it all adds up. Now, you remember the Wall Street Journal asked the President and Governor Clinton, after they looked at their economic plan, and said, can't either one of you folks add? This one does add up. It is real. Could it be improved? Possibly so. Are we flexible to change it and improve it? Absolutely. A better idea is all it takes. What is the litmus test that it must go through? Is it fair? Is this the best plan for the American people, right? Let's assume you put this in and 6 months later somebody has a better idea. We can change it. The thing we can't do is just sit here playing Lawrence Welk music, wonderful, 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 doing nothing. We've got to start moving. Well, here's the result. Over a 6-year period, we'll be down to here. We'll have a surplus in our budget. Why didn't we move more aggressively? We didn't want to disrupt the economy. Where will Governor Clinton be? Right up here. Where will President Bush be? Right up here, just drifting along, if you will. That assumes everything goes well. Everything that I've been able to learn from studying this problem indicates to me that we need to move to do this. Then, of course, the critics during the campaign are saying, gee, if you go too hard and too fast, you might cause a more severe recession. Well, as I have pledged to use the terms of Vietnam, we will not destroy the village in an effort to save it. If common sense and the interests of the American people dictate slowing down, we'll slow down. Just use your head. But the thing you can't do is do nothing. This would be comparable to knowing you had gangrene in your toe and doing nothing and then wondering why you had to lose your whole leg. Now, we have a $4 trillion debt. Let's look at this map here. Look at the purple, and let me tell you what, if we had the $4 trillion still in the bank, we could do with it. Right now it's gone. We don't have much to show for it. Worst public school systems in the industrialized world, most violent crime-ridden society, and most drug-laden society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cities in decay, but we know that. Let's clean it up. But if we had $4 trillion, here's what you could do with it. And everything that's purple here. We could buy a $100,000 home for every family in every one of those states. We could put a $10,000 car in the garages of each of these houses. Then we could build 1,000 $10 million libraries for 1,000 cities in these states. We could build 2,000 schools in these states costing $10 million each and have enough left over to put into a savings account, and from the interest alone in that savings account, pay 40,000 nurses and 40,000 teachers an annual salary of $32,760. And finally, we'd still have enough from the interest income alone to give a $5,000 a year bonus to every family in those states. That's what $4 trillion would buy. We just can't keep throwing money out the window. And this is the year when you have a voice, because you have organized to have a voice this year, and your votes determine who gets into office. Make sure that whoever you vote for in the House, the Senate, and for President is absolutely committed and will handle this problem for you. We've got to reorganize our government to win the economic war. We've got to get ourselves organized for the 21st century. Step one, we've got to slash the White House cabinet and congressional staffs. Staffs don't get much done. All the action is in the field. But for example, in 1960, Congress had 6,700 staff members. Today they have 30,000. The White House had 375 in 1960, and today has 1,850. All they do is clutter up communications between the people and the leaders. We've got to change the whole organization in Washington so that people come to Washington to serve us and not to cash in. We absolutely must stop deficit spending. We've got to replace Graham-Rudman with a bill that will really eliminate the tricks, the loopholes, and the improper accounting procedures. We've got to give the president line-item veto to eliminate pork barrel and waste. We must eliminate PACs, political action committees. We've got to make our elected officials responsive to the people and not to the special interests. That's job one. We've got to eliminate all possibilities of special interests giving large sums of money to candidates, and we must leave no loopholes. We must limit political contributions to $1,000 and no other way. Today we hold elections on Tuesday. It's hard for working people to vote. They have to go early in the morning or late in the afternoon. Let's change it and hold elections on both Saturday and Sunday. Make it easier for working people to vote. We've got to require all members of Congress and the President to turn in excess political funds from prior campaigns to the U.S. Treasury immediately after a campaign. No grandfather exemptions, no exceptions. We must make adequate television time available in equal amounts to competing candidates. We must eliminate the need to raise millions for campaigns. This corrupts our process. As a matter of principle, we must get rid of all the freebies in Congress and the White House, such as free haircuts, free gymnasiums, free prescription drugs, free ambulance service, and the list goes on forever. These people are our servants. We don't have those things. Why should they? We've got to give the voters the exclusive right to grant Congress, federal employees, and the President a pay raise. That'll keep their heads clear on who they work for. Congress has given itself a retirement plan that's worth 2 to 3 times what you and I get. We need to bring it back in line with ours. Makes no sense for the people who work for you to have a better retirement plan than you have. You wouldn't let that happen in your business. 93 members of Congress under the existing pension plan have retirements greater than $2 million. Let's just make it competitive with our pension plans. Congress absolutely must stop exempting itself from laws it imposes on us, such as the Disability Act, the Equal Opportunity Act, the Occupational Safety Act, Fair Labor Standards Act, and believe it or not, sexual harassment. Only in America would they pass laws impacting us and exclude themselves. It's hard to believe, but we've got 1,200 federal airplanes worth $2 billion that are used to fly our servants around like royalty. Get rid of them. Let them get on a commercial airline. Have the same experience we have. They work for us. We must restructure our system so that the citizens who come to Washington to serve us cannot cash in as foreign lobbyists. They must stop cashing in on public service. Former federal officials, elected, appointed, or career civil service, should never be able to serve for lobbyists for domestic interests for 5 years after they leave office. Never should they be allowed to lobby for foreign countries, companies, or individuals. We should impose criminal penalties for violators. We must pass a law stating that former presidents, vice presidents, cabinet officers, CIA directors, the Federal Reserve chairman, Senate majority leaders, and speakers of the House can never lobby for foreign countries, domestic interests, accept gratuities or fees of any kind, or cash in on their service. Our current tax system is like an old inner tube that is covered with patches. We must replace it with a new, fair, simple tax system. Above all, the new system must be fair. It must also raise the necessary revenues. It should be paperless for most Americans. You can't put another patch on the old system and make it work. First, remember Cicero's words. The budget should be balanced. The treasury should be refilled. Public debt should be reduced. The arrogance of public officials should be controlled. That was true 2,000 years ago. History did repeat itself. Now that we have taken a look at some solutions, where do we go from here? If we will all make the sacrifices that I have suggested, if we will all do our fair share, what can we expect? What can our great country be? Let's look past the moment and take a quick snapshot of the future. If we take the steps I've outlined here today, we can again be a country with its spirit restored, its people back to work, and its government back in order. We can be a country where exporting cars is the rule and importing cars is the exception. I want to be around here when that happens. We can be a purposeful and thriving country, building bridges instead of building debt. We can be a country whose people are working hard at their jobs instead of working hard just to find jobs. We can be a country whose children proudly wear their school colors instead of wearing gang colors. We can be a country whose families save some of what they earn rather than spend more than they can afford. We can be a country with health care that is cost-efficient and effective rather than expensive and mismanaged. We can be a country leading the way instead of a country falling behind. We can be a country where, once again, the diversity of our people is our greatest strength instead of division being our greatest weakness. We can be all of these things tomorrow if we will make the tough choices today. Passing the American dream to our children is vitally important to every single one of us. When I was a young man, it took less than 2 generations to double the standard of living in our country. Today, because of the way our country has been mismanaged, it will take 12 generations to double the standard of living of our children. Can this be fixed? Of course it can. Will it be easy? No. The sooner we start, the sooner we'll finish. But believe me, it will be a whole lot easier than a lot of the things the people did for this great country who came before us. I'll take this challenge anytime, to going west in a covered wagon. I'll take this challenge anytime over the challenge the the people had who fought the revolution and gave us our freedom. They had their lives on the line. This is just hard work. If we will do it, if we will team up, if we will make our diversity a strength instead of a weakness, if we will focus on a goal, and if we won't quit until the battle is won, we can pass on the American dream to our children, because we can do anything in this great country. That is the American dream. We can be anything we want to be. Now, it's going to be tough, but in the thick of it, think of all the difficult things you've done in the past in your life that you totally committed yourself to. I'll bet, in retrospect, these are some of your happiest memories. These are the things you sit around at night and talk about. Think how good we will all feel when we have these problems solved. Together, we can do it. Together, we can do anything. Thank you very much.
If you would like to learn more about Ross Perot's plan to fix the economy, please read United We Stand, How We Can Take Back Our Country.
Our top story tonight, residents of Linwood are on an arson watch tonight, hoping to prevent a repeat of last night's arson string.